on the panel, that is. And then there is a nice trick when you click on a video of a person who's, or on the image, the profile of a person who is not showing video, then you can click hide non-video participants. And then you will only see the panelists. And I will, oh, we have Andrew, Paulina. Okay, Shy. I will stop your video.
Wow, your eyes look so creepy.
Do they? Yes.
They look like an alien.
I'll try to be closer to the
great. We love aliens.
thing. Okay, let's see now. Out of clicking, there we go. Okay, hello everybody. We are now going to enter the second part of the show. I'm going to try to fix my eyes a little bit. Yes, that's better. This part is going to be an open panel discussion with a few amazing people whose work I deeply respect, and I'm very, very happy to have you all with me here. And I'm going to share my screen for a moment. But before that, I can see stars in Casper's eyes. Oh, that's cute. Okay, before we begin, I wanted to throw one simple question to everybody in the audience, because we're talking a lot today about reality and fiction and whether we prefer one or the other. So I'm going to run a poll right now, and you should be able to see that appearing somewhere on your screen. And if you can just take a vote now, which one you prefer to live in. Is it reality or is it fiction? And let's see how the audience feels today. Do we feel more rooted in what is tangible and that we're able to touch, or something that we would create out of thin air and out of our memory? 45 people have voted. I'm about to stop the poll in just a few seconds. Let's see. Share results. Can you see that? This is actually quite interesting. So apparently we are halfway there, somewhere in between reality and fiction. Where everybody can see the results. It's basically reality 52% and 48% for fiction, which, interestingly enough, I was actually not expecting this result. But it does show some kind of dubiousness of where we're rooted. And perhaps that in-between state is where we will remain for the rest of this panel. And now I will share my screen with you. And hopefully, can you see my screen right now? I would need audio, someone to tell me, because I cannot see the chat right now.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the title of the panel is Scripting and Designing Fiction and Reality. And I have a few objectives to achieve with the panel, or with the discussion that is going to proceed. And we will be talking about the ways that fiction can honor or describe reality, and the ways that we can construct or stage a truth or the world that we live in. And then that will take us through the layers of creating experiences for the audience and constructing narratives with different tools and using different media to create a truly transformative experience that is somewhat engaging, more than just looking, but really seeing things or experiencing them in a way that can provide more than simple entertainment. And today we have with us 4 amazing people whose experience stems in different fields. We have media theory on the table, immersive experience and exhibition design, performance, technology, and photography. And to provide just a brief introduction, Marian Kaiser, he's a writer, media theorist, curator, concept and project developer based between Berlin and Kinshasa, who often collaborates with artists to design transformative and immersive experiences that pretty much use all of the media formats that I know of. And he has published broadly in film and media theory, has been a lecturer and researcher at universities in Berlin, Dresden, Yogyakarta, and Gießen. And together with Hanna Hurcik, he is currently developing a performative installation in this amazing space in Berlin, the House of World Cultures, on object biographies and the destruction of European museum archives. That is biographies of objects. Just, I find this very, very interesting. Then we have Paulina, who's an artist with practice stemming mainly in technology. She's a creative director and lecturer based in Berlin, who is focused on immersive and virtual narratives with a very interactive approach to her storytelling, and with the use of technology on top of that. And then her practice spans installation, performance, film direction, and augmented and virtual reality. And she is a lecturer at Catalyst Institute for Creative Arts and Technology. Next up, we have Andrew Hefler, who is an actor, director, and screenwriter based in Budapest, who for many years has experience and who loves workshopping and working with people to construct and develop or strengthen their narratives, mainly with the use of performative tools or tool set. And he's a teacher at Central European University, Bauhaus, and Hungarian University of Performing Arts and Sciences, and has performed on TV, in commercials, in films, sold the rights to his TV series, provided voices of multiple cartoon characters, spent thousands of hours in the voice booth, and is a founder of Grund Theater, as well as a host of events, trainer, in short words, a performative beast, whose experience is truly very, very inspiring. And last but not least, we have with us Denisse Ariana Pérez, who's a creative copywriter and photographer, Caribbean-born and based in Barcelona today, who is interested in stories that are bold and human. And as she says, obsessed with how words, people, and imagery can speak to one another. And just over the past year, she was shortlisted or awarded photographic prizes by the British Journal of Photography, Bartour, Taylor Wessing Prize, or Musée du Quai Branly in Paris. And also her work has been featured in multiple media outlets such as Vice, The Guardian, It's Nice That, Afropunk, among many, many others. So welcome, everybody. I'm very, very happy to have you here with me. And as you all see by now, we have such a robust spectrum of different media and different experience on the table that I'm quite curious what can come up throughout our discussion. And just a humble word of introduction on my part. I am Casper Grey. I'm a curator, producer, artist, and performer, and the co-founder of Nung. And yes, I'm very happy to kind of also be involved in the realm of creating experiences for audiences. It's something that has been driving my personal career for many years, and I find it very purposeful, because through these transformative experiences, we can not only say what we think, but also perhaps change someone's lives for the better, hopefully. So I will begin with this one question related to, actually relates to many things, but I wanted to bring up the story of the film Inception, in which at the end of it, there is the very famous scene where the actor kind of puts this totem in place, and not to tell the story of the movie, but basically we cannot be sure what is really happened to him in the end. Was he dreaming, or was he actually, was it real events, or was it his only dream? And then I started thinking, why are we, and there's a big discussion around this, and people thinking what really happened in that movie. And it always was very strange to me, this notion of the real in the fiction, that we somehow assume that these characters are their ending of their story, or the continuation of their story, is somewhat real. So I want to ask you, and this is to the entire panel, and whoever wants to answer, do fictional characters have real lives of their own?
I might just start with some comment to that. I would say it depends on what we, so we can be really semantic about it, but it's like, what does a life mean, right? Like, what does that mean? So if I'll take this design, like the idea of design of life, like something continues on, it continues forward, then I would say they probably do, because we want to project meaning onto things, and we want to, because I think we inherently understand that transformation is what helps us survive, because we know, at least I align with the idea of evolutionary theory that says those that transform and adapt move forward, not those that are most intelligent, or not those that are most athletic. And so there's something inherently coded in our DNA that wants to watch and seek and feel and aspire to transformation, even though it frightens us. And I think if we have a fictive character, or we characterize something, then I do think we tend to give it a life of its own. We tend to project on it something, because we understand that it might be defining terms for us that we feel are critical to our understanding and our survival.
And I mean, probably I have to say that, but as the media theory person, so to say, but being in the realm we're meeting in right now, this question becomes even less real, let me put it that way, because, well, I've never met Andrew. I've met Casper, so I'm pretty sure, you know, he's there. The 77 other people that are apparently watching and listening right now. I mean, in other words, if I started now telling you about what I think of Andrew, who he is, what he does, what kind of person he is, what he had for breakfast maybe yesterday, all this is purely fictional. So my only way to somehow come closer to, sorry, Andrew, for taking you as an example here, but to Andrew, is by making up these, well, speculations that are purely fictional. They're not based on anything. And maybe, you know, you said he's an actor. Maybe he's a good actor. And what he just said, he has, you know, I don't know, taken out of a book before. It's not even his words. So I think within the realm of the digital we're in right now, that's going to stay with us for a while now as probably the main tool of education. I think the question is at the same time more important and less decidable. You know?
Yeah.
So you're suggesting it's the amount of context that we have to someone's story that provides us with that.
Yeah, maybe, or yeah, or that you can't have fiction without reality, or reality without fiction. I mean, we had it before. I mean, just to answer maybe in an anecdote, or anecdotally, when you asked us before, do we live in reality or do we live in fiction? You used a red color and a blue color. So obviously, being from the generation I'm from, the first thing I think of is the Matrix. Do you want the blue pill or the red pill? And the answer we used to give in younger, wilder times was always, do you want the red pill or do you want the blue pill? Oh, we want both. And the actual philosophical truth, I think, behind the stupid story is that we constantly live in both. Slavoj Žižek once said that we've already always taken both pills. We cannot decide to be in fiction or reality. We're always in the middle of it, whatever we do. And that's maybe why the film still you showed us is a bit wiser than the Matrix, because as you very, very, I think rightly so pointed out, the question is not, is it real or is it fictional? The answer is, it is both. And that's exactly what the image showed.
I think I would like to add to that. I think that as long as fiction is able to touch a real person, then it innately becomes real. I think that is, it's like when there's a saying that says that, for example, in Mexico, the celebration of El Día de los Muertos, the celebration of the dead, they believe that as long as you celebrate and remember the dead, they're still alive because they live within you. So I think that as long as fiction is able to like penetrate us, then I think they inherently become real. So
and Paulina, remember last time when you showed me a world that was virtual reality, in the virtual reality realm, I was wearing these VR glasses, and you put me in a world where there were butterflies flowing around me, and I had a gun for whatever reason. And at a certain point, I got out of control and I shot those butterflies. And to this day, I'm actually honestly saying this, I still feel a bit sad for what I did. So I wanted to ask you, how does that happen? Why do I mourn their digital death? Can't hear you. Is it only me?
No, I can't hear her.
I think she's muted.
I'm not sure. Okay, let's try. Cannot hear. Maybe the mic or the headphones are not working well. This is why, yeah, so why Paulina sees if she can maybe find the headphones or something that could make a different outcome. This is something that we experience not only in technology, but also in books and films. And we often cry over characters that died. And so what happens that this emotional engagement, where does it exist? And this is to anyone.
Oh.
Yeah, you were breaking up sound-wise for me. I don't know why. I'm sorry. Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. I just want to ask, maybe Paulina, did you manage to put your headphones? Yes, there we go. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So maybe let's go back to my initial question.
I don't know, in a sense, I can interpret this like between these kind of blur boundaries that exist between kind of like the character as a protagonist and as a real person, as a real animal, as a real plant. And on the other side, the avatars that nowadays are very often present in our society and in the digital. So this kind of, on one side, incarnation in digital shape something that is more kind of spiritual and existing. So giving a deeper meaning to an iconic element, a visual element, a character, or just an object. It's something that has been like since ever, maybe in humanity and religions present, and nowadays it has been sublimed through the presence of these kind of avatars and digital characters. So I think it's a kind of normal human continuation of assuming that if something is can be seen, it also has a life on its own, as you were telling before. And this life, maybe it's not real, maybe it's not intended in the sense of everyday reality, but maybe it's another layer of reality that still it's very close to us. So yeah, I think like it's natural that probably you felt that.
But if those are incarnations and you speak about creating life, then who's the creator? Is it the author or the receiver?
The creator, it's the creator probably of the story of this avatar as in the formal aspects, but there is always an interpretation from the public. And this also I wanted to add before, somehow reminds me a lot of fan art. And for example, when we have always the kind of I don't know, bestsellers or amazing blockbuster movies or Marvel superheroes. There is, after some time, after even like very short time, very often we see people like creating their own stories that are not linked to the main one and starting giving life outside these boundaries for these like imaginary characters. So these are their interpretations of that characters that were created by someone else, but then continue through them and through their like interpretation needs, and maybe other side stories or just like cosplay. I know it's kind of like a wide range of field, but it's kind of somehow all interconnected in that sense. Like maybe it's starting somewhere with a creator, as you're saying, that gives like an object, a reference, a visual reference, and then through that visual reference we have the interpretation that can be going like in any direction.
Thank you. Would anyone offer a comment on what Paulina has said?
Well, one thing that comes to mind for me, and I really, number one, I really appreciate everything that everyone said here, because I think it's extremely poignant, and I really am in agreement with all of this. And I think to Paulina's point, just to take it into kind of that idea of how do we project onto narratives, like what do we want to do with them? When we find ourselves a character in a story, or we find ourselves an actor in a narrative, even projecting that meaning onto those digital butterflies, because I kind of feel that the central purpose of let's say your path to being wise or wisdom is educating your emotions. And so you're going through your experiences trying to educate your emotions. Sometimes you do a good job of it. Sometimes you don't do a great job of it. And sometimes you get confused by it. Sometimes you try to hide the experiences that they have because you want to avoid the vulnerability or pain. And so you can even take these kind of surrogate creatures, and then you educate yourself. You educate yourself in empathy. You educate yourself in being dastardly, or you educate yourself in your violence or your propensity towards peace, or all of these things. You give yourself an opportunity essentially to kind of test through, because you're not, being rational, you understand these butterflies don't exist in this reality that you perceive as tangible and real, but they completely exist from the perspective of how do you relate to this as a social animal? How do you relate to this as something that like what is value to you? And you give yourself an opportunity in these little micro narratives or these micro moments to take yourself, to suspect yourself, to sometimes abuse yourself, sometimes to treat yourself wonderfully, whatever it is, but you take yourself through these processes, I would suspect ultimately to educate your wisdom, right? Which I think is like the release of being egotistical and trying to prioritize that may have at least more social or group oriented meaning, which is kind of the way I would define wisdom, maybe, is that you lack vanity and egotism to try to prioritize something that might be for you or others around you more meaningful or useful. So I think that's one take I might have on that.
Thank you.
I think to add to what Andrew said, I think there's also a lot of emotions and untapped emotions and like blocked even traumas or emotions that we haven't really released that we carry throughout our lives. And in your case with the butterflies, or in other cases, it could be a specific scene in a book, and maybe it's completely unfamiliar in the very tangible archive of our memories, but it's an emotion that has maybe been dormant inside of us. And it just needs something very different and very outside of the realm of our archive of memories to be untapped. So I think that could also definitely be a reason for that morning of the butterflies, for example, that you had.
Mm-hmm. So in a sense, storytelling then becomes like a playground of life, and that we get to simulate experiences that we would normally maybe have in the real world. And by doing so, we are better able to interact with the world. Is that what you're suggesting?
I think we are, in many ways, fiction and can allow us to develop empathy in a better way, in many ways, because our level of empathy can be very narcissistic and actually very navel-gazing. It can just be, we can only empathize to that which we know. So I think fiction allows us to empathize outside of what we know, which is very humbling, but is very important.
Mm-hmm. And then do we need to, you think, realize that what we're interacting with is in fact fiction? Does there need to be that separation? Maybe Marian, you could say, like, how close do we need to be to reality to have that kind of simulation experience?
I'm not sure, but for a second, sorry, just because I was just thinking about what Denisse just said,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, or what Andrew said before, I mean, whether it is our consciousness or our subconsciousness, you know, like that which is deeply hidden or that which we use in every day. Usually all those things were not born from inside of us. Language is the easy example. I didn't invent language, it was given to me. Mm-hmm. It has an exteriority, it has an outside, you know, and the same way history has, the same way the society around us has. So you know, and I think there's this extreme exteriority on the one hand, and then there is what Paulina was talking about before, or what you were talking about before, the way we are attached with our affects, with our emotions, with our thinking, with our consciousness and subconsciousness to this exteriority. And maybe I don't know if fiction, but just the process of telling a story, the process of engaging with an outside, with your inside. Maybe, you know, this maybe subjectivity has a lot to do with being this point of crystallization in between this outside and this inside. You know, and I think telling stories is one way, as Denisse said, to then, you know, take really the big forces of history, of the big forces of your own history, and have them meet with your presence, you know, with your nerves, with your thoughts, and just to connect that. Sorry, that's what I was thinking about when you asked me another question. That's I just I just thought that was really interesting. But I forgot
Yes.
the question now.
No.
You asked now.
It's okay. It's okay. That's a beautiful point you just made, and I think maybe Paulina wants to comment on that.
Yeah, because like speaking a lot about empathy and speaking a lot about our personal kind of emotions, and then about narratives. There is now like what I was mainly like fascinated about some of the latest work with like virtual reality and stuff. They were leading towards a totally kind of new way of exploring narratives that can be called like intimacy narratives, and that they are meant to in a way connect people. And what we had before, maybe in forums or chat rooms, or kind of what was before the kind of epistolary exchange of thoughts, of feelings in the past. So the medium has changed, and but somehow this way of interacting has now been totally switched to technology on a level where connection between people and sharing emotions and getting empathy like on a higher level, because you get to know people more closely, is also put in a frame of storytelling. For example, there was an amazing work where basically it's a participative, so it's participatory narratives where you have maybe a framing, you have maybe kind of a story world with an aesthetic, and when you put the headset, you jump in there, and it's totally kind of a dreamlike, and it also like somehow emotionally appeals to you and triggers you to share in a way. And you explore this environment by seeing like some tiny creatures, and actually these creatures are when you get them, you can hear the thoughts of the other visitors and participants that were before you. So it's kind of anonymous in one sense, but it's also very liberating. I mean, it gives a lot of freedom, because a lot of people expressed anxieties, fears, their like maybe even desires, positive like aspects, and things they never even told like to friends or to family. And you have this real just like anonymous thoughts hanging maybe on trees and in these like different rooms and environments, and basically you are in the middle of other people's feeling and thoughts, and all going like through a kind of a narrative in between, that it's not just like I don't know, like reading or just hearing someone speaking, but it's somehow, yeah, it gets like to a more like collective point of like collective unconscious, but also empathic way of feeling that through technology finally we're reaching, I think.
So it's a way of collaborative imagination.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're suggesting is that technology enables us to imagine in groups, like imagine together,
Mm-hmm.
and collect those thoughts and kind of exchange them. And I think that could maybe go further to the idea of stories having stories of their own. That once you tell the story, it kind of ceases to be yours, and then it takes a life, not only the characters in it, but also the way it's told and the meanings, the context that it has, and the way that it's interpreted.
And also basically also you become part of something bigger, which is also nice. And then again, like the empathy of not being just thinking about like yourself as a main participant or character or protagonist, because we were speaking until now like about characters, and now we have this participative collective moment where in the narratives you are one of the many. And but on the other side, you are deeply part of the story, and you're deeply experiencing it, and you will just leave a trace of your own, like doing the same in the end.
And I wonder how that, because I see a very interesting link, both a clash and the link between technology and body, in a sense. So what you're suggesting, these collaborative ways of imagination, also exist in theater, don't they, Andrew? And how does that realm of technological imaginary transpond to what you do?
Well, there's a few different levels. Let me try to understand the question, see if I have it right. Like, what are some of the parallels, or what are some of the distinctions between what you might get in live performance versus multimedia or mixed media performance integration, like finding narratives?
Sure, let's go with that.
Was that the question?
It's close, yes.
It's close. All right. Well, I think they're just like, they're surrogate platforms, really. All of them are. And they're steeped in like tradition and ritual. And the newer multimedia or mixed media platforms, and these things that are kind of riding the technology curve of the recent decades, they're just newer territory. They're just newer platforms for ultimately, they probably, and they might not always be this way, but they serve essentially the same purpose, I would guess. Meaning that what drives us to want to do this, to tell stories or to communicate narratives or to research, trying to transpose our stories into other terms or into other settings, to kind of wake up these ideas of educating our wisdom, or educating our society, or educating our feelings, our empathy, our emotions. We're just picking different stratospheres to do them in a lot of ways. And because theater is very limited, number one, because it's dimensionalities, it's space, it's room. You need the people, well, you don't need them because it's changing, but ideally you want them in the room. Ideally you want the actors on the stage. There's all these kind of things that have, and the stage is a dangerous place. It needs to be a dangerous place, meaning that we will go through things and suffer through things, or endure things, or be vulnerable about things, or try to resolve things that you maybe at this very moment sitting in the audience don't have to do, but you kind of understand that you vicariously do. But if I kind of surmise it all, for me, the ultimate goal is this. I want, if people come and watch something that is in theater or on the screen or wherever it is, my goal, I think, just selfishly and independently, is that I want them to go home talking about one another. That's my goal. That's what I want to achieve. If I make a movie or a TV show or a play or write a song or whatever it is, my goal would be ultimately that these people go away with something to talk about one another, and be independent of what they've experienced, just because of the vicarity and because of the surrogate element of it. And I think these other new technologies just offer us really amazing caverns and really amazing platforms to retranspose. And then if there's an alternative reality out there, if there's an alternative fiction out there that can be newly juxtaposed or can be newly layered in meaning because of these things, I think it's fantastic. I'm not necessarily sure and this is not an opinionated statement, it's just a statement of, I'm just of my own age and my own experience, that I'm not necessarily even sure we need it, because I don't know that we're doing that well with the stuff we already have. So if it helps us be better at understanding how much we should care, or understanding how much we matter to one another and how interdependent we are on one another, then I'm voting all for. And so, yeah, so and I think it's beautiful to be exploratory, because there's like you said, there's a story inside of every story, and then that even goes so multidimensionally. It's like the struggle to achieve the story is also revealing, you know, and the effort or the accident of, or the making of your own luck of, or the development of a craft, or all of these things are part of the narrative. They're all part of this beautiful story that should challenge us, or, you know, be revelatory, or make us feel good about things, because we know that, you know, our capabilities are actually immense, and and we just often disappoint ourselves, and we often disappoint each other, and we often treat each other poorly or ourselves poorly, and our environments poorly. And sometimes we treat ourselves wonderfully. And it's nice to tell stories about that. And if there's multimedia ways to do this, or to get other insight into it, or to reflect our current state, I think it's great. Yeah.
Okay. So ultimately, you don't find so much difference in the purpose of it, in it being telling narratives in order to tell people something about themselves. Although I would argue that at this particular moment, due to the pandemic, the technological tools actually allow us to extend that into the reality that was just thrown on us, that we kind of have to use technology to project all these narratives somehow. And thank you for that note. And I wanted to go back to that idea of truth and fiction and the in-between realm, and because this is also very present in both Denisse's and Marianne's work, this notion of the in-between, or the abstraction of a certain truth. And I wonder what you would say to that, how you define how much truth you implement into the real stories that you say, because you often tell real stories with a certain element of abstraction or fiction in them. So what is your approach, either Marian or Denisse? And Marian, we cannot really see you well very much in the virtual background right now. It's very, very dark. Thank you.
Sorry,
Yeah.
could you repeat the question? Because there was a kind of rough sound coming from my end. Sorry.
Sure. Let me restate it specific to your work. Your stories are largely, or a bulk of them are based in Africa, and yet you don't tell them in that same way that we're used to, typically, stereotypically. Those are real stories, but you don't convey a lot of factual information in them. So how do you define that in between? Where do you find it, and why do you use that in order to tell stories?
Well, for me personally, I don't know if Mariam wants to go first, but for me, it's a very personal choice. For me specifically, I became very tired of the usually tragic narratives that were told around Africa. And I found so much beauty there myself. I felt so much poetry, and I wanted to focus on that. There was an almost like a political choice of, I'm not gonna feed these stereotypes. And actually the stereotypes that I grew up with, I grew up in an incredibly like racist country. So, and I'm half Black myself. So I wanted to allow myself to see beauty in places where I was told there was no beauty. And so it was a very conscious choice to do that. And it was a great exercise for me creatively, because the first times I started to travel there and explore, I would just capture in a very literal way, like very realistically. I mainly photograph people, so I only photograph people. And I was like a kid who was very curious and eager about finding, your first time encounter with something. It's novel and it's new. But then that is the easy way to tell a story, I would say. The harder way to tell the story is look at what is there and allow yourself to imagine within what is there. And it taught me to be extremely resourceful. And it taught me also to look deeper when I traveled. It forced me to look at tiny corners and not look at the obvious. I would question myself constantly. Am I portraying this in the most like beautiful and dignified way that I can? And am I adding to a stereotype? Am I portraying this in the many ways that I've seen it in the past? So I would exercise that with myself And it was a wonderful creative, it takes work because you really need to. You could be in an arid environment and there's nothing, and you need to ask yourself, what can I imagine here? So it's a great creative exercise, but it takes a lot of, the more you do it and the more disciplined you become about it. But there's something personal for me, but there's something political in that.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's also interesting to blend like documentary and artistry. I don't think that gray zone for me is the interesting part. I actually had an exhibition recently, before the pandemic, in Mexico City. And it was this huge, the biggest art fair in Latin America. And all the art was commercial art. So people were very shocked because I was showcasing an exhibition of people living with albinism in East Africa. And most people were there to like purchase very expensive art. And then they were like, wait, what is this? Is this journalism? But it's art, but it's here. And they didn't know what to do with that space. It was very interesting. And they kept on asking me like, do you feel that art could talk about social awareness? And I was like, definitely can. So it's a great zone that I think it's unexplored, but it might be more effective into teaching or opening people up to other realities that are not their own. So that's why I hope I answer your question. That's why it's a very personal choice for me, but also I find there's a boldness in it, but I find that very, for me, very exciting.
Thank you very much. I find it very powerful in the work that you do, how that approach of having that layer of distance between the truth and reality serves as a purpose of breaking stereotypes and to show something that was usually maybe overlooked. And I wonder, and also on another note that you said, how to place art in the context of those who are very privileged to see and buy it, when it was created in a community, for example, who suffers deeply. Those are very interesting ethical questions related to how it is produced, shipped, distributed, published, and who's the ultimate benefactor of it all, right? And I wanted to bring maybe a question related to that truth and fiction in specific to Africa, to Marian, who's now based also out of Kinshasa, Congo, which is this very interesting space. And Marian, how would you approach to tell a story about that place? Would you need that layer of separation, or would you go all in? This is what is, and this is what I think about it.
That's a very difficult question, because I think it leads to the heart of something one could call positionality. Who are you in a certain environment, and what right do you have to tell which story, which I think is contemporarily a very big question and a difficult question. So, so I think right now, personally speaking, I'd be very careful in telling a story about Kinshasa or sharing my story about Kinshasa, because I think there's a long history of Europeans going to Africa and telling their story about it. Maybe it's not the point in time where I have to add to that.
I was more asking, sorry, just
I understand. I'm just trying to get, and so I'd like to shift the question a little.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I mean, what we're trying to do right now in having taken this experience with me back to Berlin right now, you know, or living in between these two places, we're just, you said it before, we're just preparing this exhibition installation at the House of the World Cultures, my dear colleague Hannah Wutzig and me from the Mobile Academy. And it's on museum archives and European museum archives. And there the question of how much fiction do you need to show reality becomes really, really, really important. I mean, and I think this is something, for example, an experience in Kinshasa has done to me, that there is a certain way of suddenly looking at museums. I mean, what do I look at when I look, for example, at the Museum of Natural History in Berlin? Do I look at the evolution of life as they present it? Or do I look at 30 million objects collected from all around the world, often under colonial circumstances, you know, like later under post-colonial circumstances, brought to this museum? And what is the story, the fiction I want to tell with those objects? So what, and you need a story to tell with these objects. I mean, to give an example, taxidermy animals. So you have all these taxidermy animals there. What do they show? Do they show a habitat, and do they show a life? Or do today they show how many of those animals were killed and are actually dying outside of the museum because we're in the middle of the 6th great extinction? So maybe is the fiction or the story I have to tell with this animal no longer the story of its life, but is suddenly this object itself referring to death, to the extinction of the same animal outside of the museum. And how do I tell this story? Or is suddenly the stone and the mineral that's lying there from Congo, it's not just an interesting piece of stone that I can look at, but is this the same mineral that maybe functions in my laptop and in my mobile phone, because these resources are being taken to produce that. So the question for an exhibition, and I think that's why I'm answering it from this exhibition angle, because that's what we're working on right now, is what are the fictions you need to tell the contemporary reality of an object? And I think that's where right now, in the work I'm doing right now, where fiction and reality, or storytelling and reality meet. What's the story this object tells us that's a different story than the story that's usually being told about, or something. Yeah.
Thank you. It's an artful balance to strike, I think, a very interesting, because it can evoke so much emotion, and also stories within stories within stories, nested stories, and then how we all deal with it on the meta level. And thank you for that. And I wanted to bring it to Paulina, who cites in her work this term of digital archaeology, where the objects that Marian, you were talking about, are now existing in the virtual realm. And so I would like to ask you maybe how you approach telling the story of that virtual digital space.
Like a few years ago, when for the first time I was like met with photogrammetry and 3D scanning, I was like kind of amazed, because it was mainly used for just more technical purposes. And so there was all this hype about how you can just get the right data, or, you know, like exact shape of an object, or to how to you can recreate out of an image, satellite image, an entire territory. I mean, that's how we use like explore Google Maps. And it's kind of a way of getting into the knowledge. So it's kind of like truth and like reality, but also going into the knowledge. So there are two aspects, in my opinion. One aspect is like the objective, like structure, shape, The production of an object that can be natural, that can be as well an artifact, a human artifact. So also for example, if we speak about museum objects, we can have natural and like natural history, and so we can have real animals. Or on the other side, we can have object that has been like created by humans. In both cases, there is kind of an objective truth, like that is their shape. So nobody can question that. I mean, can, but it's more going towards maybe some kind of more philosophical questions. But then there is a more tangible aspect that it's one of the denotation of that object. So the narrative, the story I'm telling about it. So it can be, I'm just showing one aspect of that, of the history of that object, but I'm totally hiding the other one, what has happened also during the history very often. But on the other side, I can also take it in a more creative way and go on with just putting a context to that object and placing it not in a wider context, but in like a personal story. So that object was once being carried by a young man that in his 20s was walking under and blah blah. So you start putting that object in a story that is situated not on a historical but on a personal, like, kind of more intimate level. And from there you can understand that there is this kind of way of presentation of the object, and like what you write under it, what you choose to write under it, and how you choose to present it, like in more that it's very I mean it has endless possibilities, and you can go like inventing whatever you want. One of my last works was I had to do like a very long performance, and I tend to work with storytelling. I mean, not only visually, and that's why I try to use also like new technologies. Because sometimes maybe you have to do, like in the past you had to do animation, so you have like to motivate with actions and like all this time that people is watching. And now I was like driven back to these 3D scannings and these archaeological objects. And I found an amazing collection from museums from all around the world of like 3D scans, both from archaeological that were like in the knives or everyday objects from like centuries ago. And I found also like skeletons of animals and and especially I used like a nerve from a crocodile because I abstracted it. So and it was a proper 3D scanning, and I was amazed that I could get like hold of real, like it was kind of a personal connection that I was doing. I was working with this 3D scan that was totally abstracted, but was actually belonging to someone. That crocodile existed, you know, and it was present on this earth. And now it was found and it was preserved and it was digitalized. So in a way, like being like put on another like immortal level. And I was taking his shapes and his data that was exactly his own data. It was not out of imagination, it was someone real. And this was the real connection that was triggering me like very like powerfully. And then I took it and I made a character out of him. And then I made an environment and I made a like a gaming field. But the fact is that what was kind of important to me is that the new technologies also allows us to do this connection with the past and to reshape what was reality, like a crocodile, just an animal walking that would otherwise die and like be forgotten forever, now it's kind of immortal, and it's can be like a protagonist of other stories and realities, and it's like a giving back life.
It's beautiful. That's very interesting. The crocodile digitized and immortalized. Maybe any of the panelists would have a question to that. And also, if anyone on the class is interested to ask a specific question, you can write in chat at all times.
Oh, I don't even know if it's a question or more an overall question, because I think that's really interesting, because in that moment you're actually doing what we felt a lot of the museums are not doing. That's why I very much like what you said before. I mean, one example is, again, this Natural History Museum in Berlin right now, as we speak, is digitalizing 30 million objects, all of them. So what do you do with all this data? How do you tell a new narrative? How do you tell a different story? And then usually what happens is either there's some stuff that they do with the digital data that is important. For example, you know, like via the teeth of a rhino and its hooves, trying to find out what it walked on and what it ate, to then create a simulation in which they can say, oh, that's how the climate changed, and these are the plants that disappeared, and these are so kind of, you know, kind of sorry to say that bluntly, but a bit, you know, like what you said before, taking this awful useless death of an animal to protect other animals, which I think is a good way to go for the museum. But what is often missing is exactly what you have done. This moment of abstraction. For example, I mean, they have a lot of taxidermy animals, mounted animals. So if you want to show them on your website, you photograph a dead animal. Why immobilize an already immobilized animal in a photography? Why photograph dead animals? And it's just something, if you just put it on the museum website, you're like, what are you doing? But if someone now came up and started thinking about what's the difference in between photographing an animal and photographing a dead animal, and would start working from there, I think this is the moment the museum would be an educational space that we dearly need to think about these questions. So it's more a, I think I can very much relate to your feeling starting out from a tooth and trying to, so to say, reanimate it in another story. It's just more than a question, actually, a remark.
Yeah. And then Andy, you want to say something?
Well, I really appreciate all of these accounts, because I think they're fascinating. One correlation I draw to the theater right away is in a lot of exercises, we personified objects. So there's ways that we dramatize them and give them characteristics and label them and then animate them, even if it's just imaginatively, or we actually animate them and you can even play scenes with them. Maybe you see Tom Hanks fall in love with a volleyball on an island or something like that. So there's many different ways that we can breathe life into things. And then the appreciative of even turning it into a narrative that helps to be constructive and develop empathy and understanding, and to perhaps try to untie a knot in our narrative. I think just to go back to this whole idea of how much fiction do we need in our reality, and I believe we actually need a very healthy dose of it, because our tendency is we've got troubling tendencies in that we're trying to work out our confirmation bias, because the brain is such a phenomenal associative machine that it constantly seeks out narratives that it likes and that confirm the way it already thinks it feels. And a lot of times that's tried to cut corners. It's trying to get through the trauma that Denisse was talking about without scratching the surface on it. It's trying to deny realities that have been violent and have been disposing and despot and horrific. And it's trying to, even, you know, if people are bored with their lives and feel uneventful, or whatever it is that they're traumatized or frustrated by. And I think one of the great things that fiction does is, because it transposes these realities, it actually alleviates us from being implicated in every single sense of reality. Now it turns it over and it democratizes, if for use of a very perhaps inaccurate word, but it democratizes the way that we can relate to narratives, because now I'm treated as a responsible listener, and I'm able to take because imagination, I believe, is perception. And so it asks me to perceive. It asks me to perceive and re-perceive and reapply and reappropriate. And if I'm responsible and if I'm caring, then I actually won't necessarily have to commit to liking or not liking something, agreeing or not agreeing with something, but I'm happily now enduring and endeavoring all these feelings that I have that may conflict with what I like to believe. And this, I believe, gives us the opportunity for that idea of transformation that we may have mentioned and talked about a little bit at the top, is that's what I think narratives are ultimately for, is they're just helping us gain the understanding, courage, and purpose for transformation, something that we desperately fear. Oh, cool to see the poll results. Yeah, explaining and sharing knowledge wins. Sorry to jump in on your job there, Casper. But yeah, and I would say that all of them are arguable, right? That's why they made it on the list. But it's for me, in a sense, it's a little alleviating to realize that it's sharing and explaining knowledge, which I think is like sharing and trying to understand our common condition, and trying to make growth, or trying to untie the knots, trying to uncover the stories that we spend so much time ignoring or trying to cover. That might be my 2 cents on this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think if I might add to that, I think there's something also I totally agree with what Andrew said, but even more so, I think it's an allowance to, like, if we speak on a psychological level, I think if we allow ourselves to add fiction to reality, it's very much like allowing our inner child to look at things. And I think that is very powerful, not only creatively. It's not just adding fiction, doesn't mean just adding colors and adding, glitter to a universe. Like, adding fiction is just adding also subjectivity, but also adding emotion to something. And I think there also needs to be a re-description of what fiction is, because I think there's also a misperception of what fiction is. It's just mystical and like magical, and that is a part of that. But fiction also means like putting our own selves into something, and adding subjectivity to reality.
And that layer of subjectivity, I think, since it's an abstract one, also serves to immortalize whatever is being told, which I find very purposeful with narratives. And this is also what we had been talking about before, about like how you can extrapolate a certain, even an object that is somewhat immobilized or dead or doesn't have a life of its own, and add that layer and make it much bigger than it is already. And I wonder if we could do the same thing with humans, and should every human also have its own place in a digital museum where all his data is immortalized this way, but in a sense, as not in the way that Facebook uses us and social media manage our data, but more for the sense of preserving our own history. How would you feel about a museum of that kind?
I think if it's not as I don't know, I wouldn't want it to be a cemented history. I think, like Andrew was saying, that if we are to be ever evolving beings, and we should aspire to, and like constantly transforming, then I think a very cemented and rigid story of ourselves, then I don't know, that would feel very not only finite and like terminal, but also I think it would go against this notion of we have lived, but our stories, the stories about ourselves, can also be ever evolving, even if we're not existing. So I would hope that archive has the opportunity to be edited.
Mm-hmm.
Personally,
I wanted to just ask the class the same question. Would you like to be immortalized in the same way? Just write in the chat, please. And then Andy, please say what you have.
Well, I think that if we try to accept what we've read or understood or been told to be history as fact, and I think I can't, if you put that in a poll and said how many of us here thinks that all the tales of history and all of the archives of history are factual, I would guess that it would be 100 to 0, that we think it's all fact. And so that means we have a very long tradition of putting fiction in our history. And it's been utilized very abusively. It's been utilized to retard growth and to keep people oppressed. It's also been used to free us. It's also been used to create beauty and wonder. It's also been used to empower. There's so many different sides to that coin. So the tradition probably continues. Now the question is, are we going to be more benevolent and understanding and caring about it? Have we prioritized that enough yet? And I think, maybe I'm being too simplistic about it, but I really think, like, you know, most people mistake imagination they mistake imagination for memories. Yeah, that's a common problem. And so it's just that, to me, really defines this whole blend of fact and fiction. Because, you know, it's a lot of times you probably can't necessarily even recall how real that memory of yours is. It's so much part of this narrative that you wanted to be. So you know, that really comes down to the point of how much responsibility do we want to take, and how much do we want to turn it into a narrative of empowerment and caring, rather than a narrative of sequestering and isolating. And so, you know, I think another great question, beautiful stories coming out now, is the millions and millions of objects that are never ever getting into the museum. They're just stored in archives. They're, you know, just the narrative of each museum is already curated in a very, very subjective way. And talking a lot about just the financing and the maintenance of all of these wonderful artifacts of our history that we don't even have access to. So I think there's a lot of angles on this that are extremely, extremely challenging and also extremely exciting. It's very, very cool stuff.
And I mean, if you follow the thought, talking about imagination and, you know, spice it with a bit of science fiction, I mean, isn't one of the things that is happening right now, one of the things that's happening right now, that basically the world is becoming more and more of an archive, in the sense that with a growing digitality and with a growing connectedness of things, creatures, being, people, which can have very ugly, you know, like directions, monitoring, surveillance, whatnot, which, you know, also creates moments of collectivity, I think, or group experiences, whatever. But in a weird way, I was asking myself when you were talking whether we need the classic museum anymore, because you wouldn't have to take an object from somewhere and bring it there, because actually it is as if more and more people, beings, objects, creatures in this world have like a marker that kind of makes them addressable within a certain sphere of knowledge. As I'm, you know, like, as everybody probably, you know, one is torn about that, because on the one hand, you know, we have the Pebbles was talking about dystopia and utopia before. On the one hand, you know, there's a lot of, one could imagine what would be beautiful about such a museum of life, because it would be so transformative. Things wouldn't be immobilized. People could become somebody else. Creatures could become something. There would be transformation. It wouldn't be the, you know, cementing solidification on the one hand. On the other, there is an, yeah, like I said, direction that that scares one in this thought, just to expand your museum to the rest of the world, maybe. Mm-hmm.
Just a small note, as we approached 12, but we had a thin delay, so if that's okay, we will extend a little bit the discussion by around 15 minutes. If those of you who have to leave, please, you can go silently leave the room, but the rest who can stay, please keep with us until the end of the discussion. And I think Paulina had something to say. Thank you.
Yeah, it was, we were speaking about perceptions before. There was this very nice, I think I also had to write, and I also saw that you have written that imagination is perception. I totally agree. And I think that we can go into two directions, in my opinion, like just maybe because we are also like towards the end of everything. And I like just to say like how I'm perceiving storytelling and also these technologies and stories and everything together in this point of history now. It's that we can like use these technologies to expand our realities, and for example, to work with data, to use all this data to get a more deep knowledge about things and to get more deep. And when you get more deep, you also then your imagination is triggered like by a natural course, no? So if you know that if you learn more aspects about a thing, about a history case, about a person, you also broaden your own way of thinking, of feeling, but also connecting with that thing. And the reality is becoming on. I was so in love with data visualizations for a long time when they were like first like maybe 10 years ago, and they were first like new media art with all the data. I'm still very like I don't know, I'm very often I go like watching real-time thunders around the globe or stuff like that it was not available like 100 years ago. And now real-time we can literally have the reality that is expanded, because I'm on one side I'm living mine and my small room, but on the other I can also see what is happening in this moment over the whole globe. And this can go like in a transversal way through time and through space, like now what is happening exactly now in like on the other part of the planet. And there is a very a project that I loved a lot that was about LA cops, and you can go online, there is this project that you just like constantly hear like an ambient music going in the background, and you actually listen to real-time calls, talks between police, and some of them are really kind of are amazing, because you feel this slow flowing of time, which is not the usual action we're used to, or specific moments. There are these moments in between that usually were not recorded, like what happened to the same question, what is about all the things that was not getting into the archive or not getting into the museum. There is also these parts of narratives, also in movies, in history, in everything, that are these zones of like non-importance that are actually doing our life every day, and with new technologies actually they are recorded. So I think that this is like an exceptional thing for me, in my opinion. And like these non-important like parts or conversation or movements just like lost in the transit, you know. And on the other side, so this layering of data, on the other side, this perceptive thing, that definitely perceptions and imaginations go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And we must reason in that way, and showing reality from different points of view, like not only like human perception, but maybe a perception from a point of view of an object, of an animal, of a, you know. And it's kind of something that it's also totally extending the sense of reality, and going away from the subjectivity meets me and I am human and this is the only thing I can acknowledge about reality. And so perceptions and data, and I think we can use them in a very powerful way. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And now I want to try to build up on what you said and what was mentioned in the recent part of the discussion about the digital immortality and the preservation of fictional worlds and objects and characters. I find all those realms very, very interesting. So to open the discussion a little bit to the audience, I will now create very short-lived breakout rooms where in just 3 minutes, in groups of 5 to 6, I would like you to come up with a question that will be asked to the panel in terms of the digital mortality and what you find most interesting in that realm, or the fictional, capturing the fictional, immortalizing the fictional. And let's see what we can come up with, and then we will allow 2 questions to be asked for the panel. So let's see how this goes. Open all. I will try to also do it in a way where the speakers don't land in the same room. I think it's gonna work. Okay.
Ready to rock and roll.
Is it working? Something, yes. Marian, is it just me and you? No, because we have, I think.
Shall I enter the breakout room?
No, you are in one, but we can all unmute.
Task.
Yes.
No?
Because there is more people here, but we cannot see them. Their videos are off, but you can turn them on if you wish. Shai, Victor, Jabu.
No.
Mario.
So shall I enter the breakout room?
You are in one of them, I think.
Oh.
You are, and I believe Shai, Victor, and Mario can hear us, and Julia and Saga. Can someone speak up so that I know that it worked?
Yes.
Okay, so let's come up with a question that we can ask to the panel. I'm gonna maybe leave it to the rest of you here. We have Marian with us, which is nice to maybe be able to speak directly.
Can you remind me again? What's the question?
Well, let's put it this way. What did you find most grappling or curious in this discussion?
Wow, it's quite hard to dissect it to one thing. I'll need to think about that.
And the rest of us? Sarah, David, Alice, Indra, Saga, Julia, Victor, unless they're gone for lunch and their computers are digitally alive only.
But wasn't your question also on immortality and digitality?
It was. I confused myself a little bit, I have to admit.
No. So just maybe to
yes.
narrow it down, if somebody has a question or a comment towards what links mortality, immortality, digitality, and I think that's actually quite a good question you asked there, or quite a good frame you opened up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what was this question? This can create a lot of clarity for me. What was the...
Marian, can you restate what you just said?
Oh no, I think what Casper was asking is I don't know, the relationship of digitality and immortality, or the relationship of digitality and mortality. I think that was the frame you gave. Whether there are any questions when you think about the digital and immortality, maybe whether it's uploading yourself, or whether it's being remembered, or whether it's being stored or archived, whether there are any questions concerning concerning immortality and digitality. No, I hope to not misquote you.
Yes, that was my original intention, and then I confused myself a little bit with the technicality of the breakout rooms. I am not sure if there's people actually with us. I can see their avatars, but they may be mortal and dead.
What's the relationship between digitality and immortality? Looking at it, I think that we are really like taking one step closer into creating immortality, and this digitality is like, it's a stepstone towards that, because it's almost the first time in history when we are able to upload our thoughts and our behaviors into a digital sphere. That really save and conserve all that data that could stay forever in a way.
Yeah, to me it's quite freaky actually. I don't know, because I sometimes think about this idea of what happens after your death on social media itself, and then you can assign someone to have your password, or I think I would prefer my computer to be dumped in the river and all my profiles to be gone. And not just any river, like a proper Himalayan river.
After you die, like physically dying, or that's actually very interesting, because I had this situation that a friend of mine who passed away still had an active Facebook profile. Yeah, and then I was like really thinking, you know what? How can we actually like control this? Because this is quite creepy.
I'm going to, I'm sorry to everyone about the confusion with the questions. That was a bit my fault with the shakiness of it. But I will now finish the breakout room sessions, and let's see what comes up, and then we will ask 2 questions in the open form. So I'm going to close all the rooms, bring everyone back together. Or maybe I'll give them 15 seconds to go, and then try to come back up. It's really funny how the digital really transfers to the real world. Even the breakout rooms thing, it's also a bit clumsy. Like, okay, you people walk out of the class, and there's the period, the inertia of them walking into class, like what just happened, what was it? And then you kind of sit down, have your own digital avatar with other people. It's quite interesting how that transfers. Okay, I'm gonna close all the rooms now. All participants have been given 60 seconds to leave their breakout rooms. Okay. Andy, you're unmuted. Hello.
How you doing?
Hi, good. How was your little session there? Were you able to answer my vague question?
No, you're breaking up a bit for me. I don't know if it's me or you.
Sorry, hope it won't.
No, it's great. No, it's great.
How was your little session there?
Very nice. I just one lady.
Oh, it was just you and one person?
Yeah, it's cool. Little chat. It's good. It's good. Listen, I'm getting I have to leave. Actually, it turned out I've got to.
I understand.
What should I do? Because I'd probably be maybe max 2 minutes, 3 minutes before I really have to go.
Okay, well, you can just say that you need to go, and I think most people will be with us in like a few seconds. Anyway.
Perfect.
So,
Sorry about that.
No.
Unforeseen, but
I understand. Okay, everyone is back from their sessions in breakout rooms. So we know Andy has to leave right now due to an unforeseen circumstance. So thank you so much for being with us on the panel. I really appreciate all the wisdom that you shared with us.
No.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andrew. Pleasure to meet you.
Oh,
take care.
Guys, it was excellent to really be a part of this discussion. Really loved hearing what you guys have to say, and I hope we can keep some connection alive here because I'm so curious about all of you. It was really cool. Really liked it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. You rock.
Yes, thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Ciao.
Ciao.
Okay, and now is the time I want to open the floor to maybe two questions or two angles that came up in the group discussion. So who feels like they have something to share with the rest, please, now is the time.
Petro, he already has his video turned on.
Okay, Petro.
In our group. Your microphone.
Yeah, your mic is done.
No, Petro, you can ask the question.
Yes.
Okay. I thought
yes.
that you guys meant that I should turn it off.
No. You can. Now is there. Yeah.
Thank you, Pérez. I'm gonna try to repeat it as the best I can and to keep it short. I was just wondering because, like, I love technology, or like I love these new possibilities. I love, like, I was looking at Paulina Greta's representation of data. Like, it's so beautiful. It's so inspiring. They really take out like so many. It's like a real, and you would think like, oh yeah, this is gonna move us to a change, And we were talking a lot about sustainability and what we really need to do for this planet today. And so I was wondering, there is a little bit of a question that is at the bottom of my heart, is that. And of course, as Andrew said, we are fascinated about exploration, and that's natural, and we want to play with the new, and we want to go further, and we want to go to the moon or whatever. But I was thinking, are we just playing around in a pool of digital stuff, trying to get the best out of it? But how long are we going to be able to keep it lit? Can we afford to do this? And how do we use this technology to get this out of people and really pushing them to a real action in a good direction?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys, because I love the panel and I think you guys are great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love the passion in how you're describing this. Okay. Was this a question you wanted to specifically ask to Paulina or to the entire panel?
No, I mean, I just took Paulina because her work is mesmerizing. Yeah. And but yeah, you guys can just go with your experience and passion.
Yeah, so thank you first. And I think we have to reach still this and to do this kind of a small leap between getting to know the technologies we are like living with and working with, their potentials on one side, then the creative, imaginative power and what we can get out of them. And then the next step will surely be to implement them in real life on a more like wide level. So in a sense of a real action, real impact, real connection or distribution. And this is why maybe these narratives of intimacy I was speaking before were mostly like in my mind because they were already functioning. So they were not maybe some good future potential out of them. They were already there and connecting people in a participatory way, in a way that was not done before, and in a way that it's gonna like build a different and more empathic society. So it is already happening on this kind of human interconnected level, and it can of course just maybe the beginning, and it can be improved, but on in very other aspects, like talking about planet, talking about everyday life, and talking about all the other problems that we still have. I think that yeah, we still have to do this leap and still have to pass from this imagination, once we have gathered it, like these, all these fictional designs, all these fictional narratives, these different ways of using objects, of thinking about reality, of thinking about objects, and thinking about perceiving other humans. Now that we manage to do that, we must like put it in action. So it will be, I think that will not come from one day to the other, but for sure it's also like speaking about how pervasive it is. So how many people will implement that, in my opinion.
Thank you so much. We cannot hear you, Peter. Still. Oh yeah.
Sorry, and if I could elaborate on that, and that's what I think, like technology.
You can, but very, very shortly, like 15 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry. I leave the space to somebody else.
Just need to keep the panel to a close, and we can have one more if the panelists can stay 3-4 more minutes. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. Then we have space for one more question from another group or a comment. Anyone who would like to speak, you can just unmute yourself and say.
Okay, I can. Hi. Yay, it's me. And I have.
Oh, I think.
Yeah, Pebbles froze.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hello? Oh, I am not sure what just happened.
Yeah, we hear you, Denisse. I
Okay.
can't hear Pebbles as well. She froze. True.
Yeah, she froze, but maybe her computer died or something. Okay.
Can I just quickly add something to Pietro's question?
Yes,
I think
please.
it's also
and maybe
important.
we can treat that as the closing remark. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's also about maybe doing research, and by that I mean that how do you put technology to use? Sometimes it's also getting outside of your own immediate needs and like realities, and like actually researching elsewhere. And I think that that is also very important. A lot of interesting technologies that are actually coming to surface. One of the, for example, bringing back the subject of Africa, actually has the youngest population in the world, and some of the most quickly developed technologies that are put to immediately to use, they come out of need and like smarts and necessity, and that direct interaction with needs. And I think maybe it's getting outside of ourselves and actually just doing research on other developments and how technology has been put to use, but also needs that are beyond our own needs, because sometimes I think we can just become too, again, narcissistic in our creations, and that would be also a way. And maybe humbling ourselves. When you do research, don't come with the notion of like, I'm bringing all my technological, like, you know, knowledge somewhere. Actually learn from others who are utilizing it in a different way, disruptive way, and come as a student, I think there's a lot of listening that needs to take place as opposed to just imposing technological, narratives. And that could be something else as well. Because sometimes we cannot think of all the solutions of like, oh my God, how can I save the world with, with what I know? I think sometimes that's when collaboration is important, and a lot of humbling yourself, I think.
Thank you for these words, Denisse. And I would like to take those words about the intention and the humility that goes in the way that we construct narratives and the purpose of them all as the closing remark of the session. And I would like to really, from the bottom of my heart, thank Marian, Paulina, Denisse, and the avatar of Andrew, and the audience for being here today. And I hope this was as inspiring for you as it was for me. And also maybe we can keep the conversation going in the digital world. Thank you all very much. And as you exit the room, the students, maybe you can leave one remark in the chat for us, and then we can. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot to you, Casper.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paulina and
Thank
Denisse.
you.
Was a pleasure. Thanks a lot, and keep up the great work. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye
It was
bye.
amazing. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you so much.
It was super inspiring.
Thank you. Ciao, Petra.
Ciao, great moderation.
Ciao.